Let's bring in today's star political panel, Republican strategist and senior advisor to Governor Kemp, Cody Hall, and former Obama communications advisor and author of the great book, Patriots of Two Nations, Spencer Critchley. Spencer, Cody, thank you. Let's pick up where Jackie and Alex left off. Now, we clearly have more to learn on this, but in the previous hour, Senator Mike Rounds had this to say to Jackie. Take a listen here.
I think Congress will have a series of investigations, but it goes back and it reconfirms what a lot of us have thought, which was Twitter was manipulating what information people were seeing.
And we know from the incoming Oversight House Committee Chairman James Comer that hearings are likely coming. Let me start with you, Cody. Would you be advising the Republicans that this is where you start a new Congress?
I think it's very important, but look, I think if this election told us anything, it's that voters want us focused on bringing down inflation, reducing crime, making sure that the border is secure. So I think it's an important conversation to have, but it has to be had in context, right? We have to focus on what the voters elected a new House to actually do, which I think is those kitchen table issues that I just mentioned.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we know, obviously, a deep dive into the border crisis is not only coming, but overdue. Spencer, let me ask you about the Twitter thing. Obviously, a lot of Democrat influencers in this suppression. No indication that there was anything illegal done, but your reaction?
I agree with Cody. I welcome any investigation that's conducted in any, spirit of legitimate inquiry. And, would never suggest that the Department of Justice is some kind of political organ going after political enemies, for example. And I agree with Cody that voters have pretty clearly shown in the recent midterms, and I think continue to show, that they would, believe it or not, really prefer it if politicians of both parties focused on trying to make voters' lives better instead of stirring them up with the latest sort of panic of the day and creating the latest scary monster to distract them from things that would actually make a real difference in their lives.
Well, let's turn to the voters then in the state, Cody, where you are in Georgia. We've got 3 days, the runoff race coming. First, before we dive into Warnock and Walker, how do you see it going? I mean, Governor Kemp has certainly threaded the needle between President Trump, former President Trump coming and not coming, being influencing. How do you see the race shaping up?
Yeah, it feels like it's always election season down here. But I think that this is going to come down to obviously turnout on Tuesday. Obviously, early voting numbers have been strong on both sides, but I think Herschel needs a good election day turnout among Republicans, and I think he can do that. But look, it goes back to what I just said. I think that the voters are going to be asking themselves, who's going to go up to Washington and fight for us? And I think that when you look at Raphael Warnock's record, he's voted with Joe Biden 96% of the time. And I think if you were to walk in any restaurant or any grocery store here in Georgia and you ask a voter if they agree with Joe Biden 96% of the time, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a one. So I think that that is going to be playing, obviously, in Herschel Walker's favor. The other thing I would just mention is that everyone down here has been seeing a lot of TV ads. Well, the spending advantage that Raphael Warnock enjoyed in the run-up to November was actually about a 4-to-1 advantage. And in this runoff, that advantage has been cut to about a 2-to-1 spending advantage for Warnock. So the fact that he's not spending as much as he was in relation to how much money Herschel's spending, but also that he only came in first by about 35,000 votes, I think Herschel has a lot of room for optimism.
Spencer, how do you size it up?
Well, early voting numbers indicate that it's very, very strong, and I never predict the future. We just cannot know what's going to happen, but it is looking good for Raphael Warnock, I think, for very good reasons. He's the real deal in terms of somebody who has a true moral character and has demonstrated that through the conduct of his life as a very accomplished minister who's the child of two ministers. And I think that as the Republican Party used to emphasize strenuously, character matters, and Herschel Walker is obviously completely unfit for public office, let alone the office of U.S. Senator. And I don't think most voters, I hope most voters, are not going to choose to have somebody just put in that seat, talk about voting with Biden, to basically just do whatever he's told, unfortunately.
Spencer, what do you make of Warnock not wanting President Biden to even show up?
Yeah, well, I think that, we see that with former President Trump as well, with the Walker campaign, of course, and people make these political calculations. On the other hand, Reverend Warnock has been very happy to have former President Obama show up, and anybody who's seen those clips with President Obama is reminded of what a brilliant political communicator he is. And he cuts to the heart of the matter, frankly, like when he talks about, the debate that Walker apparently had with himself about whether to be a werewolf or a vampire. And Obama said, yeah, I had that debate myself when I was 7. Now, I think this is unfair to Walker as well. I mean, I don't mean to just mock him. I don't think I think he's being exploited. He's being taken advantage of. And unfortunately, I think through him, the voters of Georgia.
Well, I don't know. Cody, I'll give you the last word to respond.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down who's going to go to Washington and fight for Georgians. I mean, if you actually look at Raphael Warnock's voting record, it is wildly out of step with where Georgians are. You can take, for example, his vote in favor of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. The EV tax credit provisions in that bill are directly disadvantaging over 7,500 new jobs here in Georgia. That's not voting with Georgians. That's voting with Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer.
All right, Cody Hall, Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for taking time. Great discussion, fellas. Have a good weekend. Go Dogs, by the way, Cody. Go Dogs.
Thanks, and go Dogs.